Thank you guys for stopping by to watch this video. If you are new to the SMT YouTube channel, maybe this is your first time here, definitely consider subscribing. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ding that notification bell so you never miss an upload from the SMT. And of course, for those of you that have been here before and you are returning, you are a subscriber or viewer, welcome on back. Glad you guys could make it here today. Here we are. This is the history of Sprint video. What I do with this particular series, the history of, is I take a look at the major wireless telecoms. We're talking Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile. I'm going to take all four. I already did the Verizon video. I'll put that card somewhere up here, somewhere. And I'll do the same thing. I'll put the AT&T history of video. I'll put it here right after that other one is done scrolling. And I'll also put the end cards at the end of the video. So you can click on those if you want to watch those later. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The reason I wanted to get this video out is because Sprint may be on the move. We may have a situation with the merger where Sprint will be no more, as it is its own company. So we're going to be seeing the new T-Mobile company with the proposed merger. The FCC, the DOJ, they have cleared the merger for approval, and Sprint's basically going to be a thing of the past because the new T-Mobile will not be taking on anything other than Sprint assets. There will be no remembrance. There will be no involvement from Sprint. It's going to be the new T-Mobile. So this is a summary of the history, the past, the modern, and all the things currently happening with Sprint. Let's do a basic summary of who Sprint is. Sprint is an American telecom company that is based out of Overland Park, Kansas. That's their headquarters. They are carrier number 4 in terms of market share amongst the big 4. Has not always been this way. They have been a more successful company in the past, but they currently have about 54 million subscribers as of fiscal quarter 2 of 2019. Obviously, they used to have much, much more, but they have fallen on rough times and things aren't as they used to be. I will be highlighting all of their history in this video. It's going to be broken down into 3 segments. We're going to cover the deep or early history of Sprint. Then we're going to talk about, I guess we'll call it the more recent history, and then we'll do like their current or more modern history, you know, things from the last 5 to 10 years. Let's go ahead and talk origins. So Sprint's original company is the Brown Telephone Company. They are, at the time, considered to be providing service to rural communities. You know, probably places like Abilene, Kansas, focusing on long-distance calling back in 1900. So they have a very deep history. Think reminiscent to like the Bell Company and what we saw with the history of AT&T video. Long distance calling was their, you know, their claim to fame. They were a direct competitor actually to Bell Company and AT&T. In 1911, Brown combined with 3 different companies with United Telephone Company, United Telephone Electric back in 1925. And then moving forward in 1939, at the end of the Great Depression, they formed the United Utilities Company. In 1964, Paul HENSON became president of the company. He also then later became the chairman. And then HENSON was credited for the nation's first fiber optic network, really trailblazing at the time, thus providing an excellent performing network in regards to sound and call quality as well as capacity. In 1972, the name was changed to United Telecommunications, using infrastructure for telegraph and for calling. And then in 1980, there were 23,000 miles of fiber optic networking, all designed for long distance calling. Really an amazing feat at its time. In 1989, it was Sprint's breadwinner. It was all about this long distance calling. It was very profitable. AT&T was not happy about this. We know based on the AT&T history of video, they don't like competition. They really like to corner the market. So Sprint was being a disruptor in that way. There were a lot of lawsuits involved. I won't get to any of those details, but you know how AT&T is. HENSON soon retired. I want to say 1990. The company was now operating at a huge revenue. I want to say about $8 billion annually at this time. Southern Pacific Railroad Company, for those of you that don't really know where the SPR labeling comes from, Southern Pacific Railroad, that's where SPR comes from, Sprint, founded in the 1860s. So, you know, no matter what has happened in the past, that's the origins of it. So that's where the name comes from. The name changed to Sprint Southern Pacific Railroad International Network Telecommunications Company. That was soon to come. And actually, beginning in the early 80s, so like 82, 83, they had the GTE purchase, right? GTE bought SPC and its long distance network. And then in 1986, the merger between GTE and Sprint and the United Telecom and US Telecom companies all became what we know today as the US Sprint Communications Company. This included GTE Telenet and United Telecom Data Communications Company, which was known as Uninet, and official name change to Sprint in 1992. Fast forward to 1993, Sprint merged with Centel Corp, based out of Chicago. This was the actual move to Sprint Cellular. 1994, there was a spinoff to Sprint Cellular Company, which then actually later became 360 Degrees Communications. In 1998, 360 was acquired by Alltel. Notice how things are coming around with these companies, mergers and acquisitions. And of course, Alltel was acquired by Verizon in 2009. In 1994, moving into 1995, Sprint was acquiring a nationwide 1900 megahertz PCS spectrum, which is where, if you guys remember, the whole Sprint PCS namesake comes from. They first deployed cellular service in Baltimore. This was in the DC metro area. They were the first communications company to actually have a fully PCS network. And just so you guys know, at the time, it was GSM. They weren't even operating CDMA yet. Sprint currently deploys a CDMA network and LT network in congruence with one another. That legacy GSM infrastructure was later sold off in 1999, and it was sold to Omnipoint, which relaunched in 2000, later acquired by VoiceStream. Those of you that know that company, that became T-Mobile. So lots of shaking and moving in the 1990s for Sprint, lots of purchases. In 1996, they had a deal with Radio Shack where they acquired tons of stores and they put all of their branding and their wireless into those stores. So in 1999, in 1999, they had the MCI deal, $129 billion merger, huge deal, proposed but ultimately failed. The DOJ and the European Union actually blocked it, so it never actually came to fruition. In 1999, we had the combined telecom, long-distance calling, along with the wireline and wireless business, became one Sprint. And then in 2004, because of some stock issues, a lot of that stuff was kind of coming up. Parts of the company were actually higher valued than others. And then there was some stock market combiners in which it's like a shareholder's nightmare if you think about it. Lots of lawsuits there. So in December in 2004, Sprint Corp, which was the number 3 carrier, along with Nextel, which was the number 5 carrier, they agreed to merge. They became the SPRINT-NEXTEL Corporation. In the merger between Sprint and Nextel, Sprint purchased 50.1% of Nextel. Makes total sense from a tax purpose standpoint. The agreement was finalized in June of 2005. The FCC and the DOJ approved it in August of 2005. So they're very quick to allow that merger to happen. One of the key concessions from the deal was that the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum that was involved in this merger had to be deployed within 4 years. There was opposition from affiliate companies. A lot of the regional carriers didn't want to see this merger happen. They obviously had contracts for services for several months and even years in some cases. Latin American connections, you think about all the deployments at this time. Sprint ended up buying most of the affiliate companies. There was a huge issue with network integration. There was some problems. It was really difficult to do it. They were such different technologies. It makes you wonder what Sprint was thinking, trying to integrate the voice and the data over Sprint's PCS network and trying to do the direct connect walkie-talkie over 800 megahertz spectrum. Ultimately, it was not effective. They had to use power source phones, which kind of limited the hardware. They obviously had huge gaps in coverage. Things have not really changed much for Sprint. No roaming on non-PCS spectrum, as well as the Nextel deal in and of itself is viewed as a total and utter failure. Monetarily speaking, it was a huge sieve of losing money for Sprint. $30 billion tax write-off in terms of debt. It totally devalued the company. And to kind of wrap things up, between 2005 and 2009, there were more and more acquisitions, building more and more debt because you had to spend that money on these purchases. So we're going to talk about Virgin and some other acquisitions over the course of the next minute or so. Fast forward to 2005, they had a $1.3 billion investment into the company Unwired. They also bought and purchased IWO Holdings, Gulf Coast Wireless, Alamos Holdings, Velocity Wireless, and Enterprise Communications, all of that in 2005. In 2006, they had the Ubiquitel purchase, Nextel Partners were all purchased, In 07, we had Northern PCS purchase. In 09, they had the Virgin Mobile purchase, which gave them 5 million customers, but also, came at a cost. They spent tons of money on that deal, and they also purchased IPCS in 09 as well. Now, in 2012, they did purchase 20 megahertz of nationwide spectrum from US Cellular, and then in 2012, this is where we get to SoftBank. So now it takes us into the more modern history and what's going on currently. So in 2012, the parent company as we know it, the Japanese conglomerate SoftBank, purchased 70% of SPRINT-NEXTEL Corporation. That was a $20 billion purchase. In 2013, Dish Network, the one we currently know, actually put in a bid to buy Sprint and outbid SoftBank. And they did outbid them, but they ended up ultimately backing out. So the FCC went ahead and cleared the SoftBank majority ownership in July of 2013. I think what ended up happening is Dish pulled out, retracted their bid, and ended up going over or trying to go and get Clearwire. They ultimately pulled out of that one as well, which is why we don't see Dish doing anything currently in wireless and why they're trying to currently get involved with the merger today. So SoftBank at the time owned 70% of Sprint. They currently have 80% ownership stake of the company now. In 2015, the whole Radio Shack bankruptcy got approved, so that was a wrap. Sprint maintained space in the stores, ultimately fizzled. They were in over 1,400 stores, and things never really worked out for them there. In 2017, Sprint bought into 1/3 ownership stake in Tidal. That was one of their purchases. Also in 2017, talks of a merger potentially between T-Mobile and Sprint started to swirl. Talks were heating up. Deutsche Telekom and SoftBank were obviously really intrigued by this possibility. And, as talks kind of fizzled, we didn't really hear much about it. Several months passed. And then in April of 2018, the T-Mobile and Sprint proposed merger became official. They wanted to make it happen. And that takes us to where we are today. As of this year, 2019, it's really been all about the proposed merger between T-Mobile and Sprint, making it the new T-Mobile company. Essentially, you would be losing a carrier, but adding Dish as the fourth carrier to replace Sprint. There's a lot of spectrum agreements and leasing of the network and all this other stuff. There's a lot of that there. But the DOJ and the FCC has approved it, so we know all is well on that side. But there is some resistance from some states that are trying to fight it and block the proposed merger as it stands. We have states like New York and Letitia James, the state attorney general, as well as California and Texas and a handful, or I should say about a dozen other states. And some of the states have flipped. They've gone from they've gone from trying to block to support the merger. And then we also have states that do support the merger and have since day one. There's a lot of stuff going on there. It's been a lot of financial troubles for the last decade or so. It goes back to all of these different purchases that ultimately failed, some mishaps with different types of network technologies, spectrum purchases, Nextel, the Radio Shack ordeal, the whole WiMAX issue. I mean, there were tons of things that got in the way of Sprint, and the quarters recently have been awful. Sprint has been hemorrhaging customers. They've been hemorrhaging jobs. Everything's been looking pretty bleak. In fact, Q2 of 2019, which I just reported here on the channel, they have an incredibly high churn rate. They're not retaining their customers. The lower number is better. Their number for prepaid is at almost 5%. Their number for postpaid is at 1.87%. Just to give you guys perspective, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon are all under 1%, well below 1%. So Sprint's current debt sits over $33 billion. That doesn't seem to be changing. All of that being tied up in the merger, T-Mobile would assume that. Not sure how they go about deferring payments and trying to figure that thing out. But again, Sprint has fallen on hard times for the last decade or so, dating back to all these acquisitions. And obviously, I think it's pretty apparent that the parent company SoftBank wants out. Probably Sprint's last hurrah. It doesn't look like they're long for the wireless game. They're going to become an integrated component. All of their customers on the postpaid side and their assets will be going to the new T-Mobile, so they will forever live on as part of the new T-Mobile should the merger be approved and things proceed as they should. They'll always be remembered as a competitor. They'll always be remembered as a resilient fighter against AT&T and offering long-distance calling and telecommunication services to the nation of the people of the U.S. And I've always seen Sprint in a good way up until recently, where I feel like they have really let down customers, and because of their debt accumulation, they haven't been able to compete. A combination of bad executives, a combination of bad purchases, the inability to keep up and compete from the network performance standpoint, they just don't seem to have the native network to support the needs of their customers. And, you know, with performance being the way it is and, you know, all of this, that they just don't seem long for the wireless business. I didn't really want to talk about Marcelo. I didn't really want to talk about Hesse. I didn't want to talk about the executives per se. I mean, we could say a lot of things about them, but overall, I feel like the company has really failed over the course of the last decade. Maybe you could actually date it back to the last 15 years, possibly. Things just haven't been good. The investments have not been wise. They haven't been effective, and the company just hasn't been profitable, and it's prevented them from competing. You guys let me know what you think of the history of Sprint. Let me know if you think maybe I missed some things. Maybe you have some fond memories of Sprint when they were able to compete and they were an effective wireless provider. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. I know things can vary from market to market, but nationally speaking, without wireless roaming agreements, Sprint just doesn't have the network to compete with the likes of AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. We will see what happens to them in the future with the merger. We will see what comes of this. Of course, there's always the possibility that things fail and they look for another buyer, but it looks like they will be looking to get out in terms of SoftBank and the parent company that owns Sprint. So you guys let me know what you think of these different types of takes that I had, some of the history components. Let me know what you think I'm missing or overlooked. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Go ahead and leave me those comments in the comment section below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like it and share it. Maybe let somebody know a little bit about the history of Sprint. And if you want to make sure that you get more videos like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload from the SMT. Don't forget to watch some of the videos here. I've got cards like all over the place, one here, 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 and here, wherever it is. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you want to see those, they're up and around. And keep it tuned here to the channel as I do more of these history of videos. History of T-Mobile up and coming, so stay tuned for that. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I am the SMT, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.